Hello, all, and welcome to the Fantasy and Sci-Fi Fanatics podcast. I'm your host, Dana Coolbaugh. Today, having a very special guest, Andy Peloquin. Andy, how are you doing today?
I am doing great. It's a delightful Monday. Well, it's Monday today. Whenever this is
That's
going live, I
fair,
don't know what day it is, but Monday is my favorite day of the week because after the chaos of a weekend, nice structured work schedule, back
yeah.
to writing.
That's fair. That's fair. I missed mine last night. My son and I, we went to a Comic-Con twice this weekend. So we did like the Saturday, Sunday thing. And my wife and
Nice.
some friends were with us yesterday, but we were just like tapped out by the end. So I like got up, I like woke up and I was like, oh my gosh, I missed my writing time. It was like 1:30 in the morning. So my wife, she's like, you have to double up today. I'm like, I will definitely have to
Oof.
double up today, but it was
Good
fun. We had a
luck
good
with
time.
that.
So yeah, we'll see how he handles that double up, but we'll get something done
Yeah.
today. So I feel you there. So Andy, we talked a little bit, with SSF Addicts, with MJ and Adrian, a little bit, we did our crossover episode. But I just want to dive in a little bit deeper, into maybe people, with your writing journey or your books that didn't get to see that episode that we did. So I just want to kind of start off and, maybe you could just tell us a little bit with any newcomers or people that didn't get to see the episode, what your writing journey's been like kind of up until this point.
Whew. I mean, that's a wild ride. So I started writing in 2013 or so. Like that's when I officially started writing. My teenage years. I like to say that in my teenage years, I had a computer, tons of time, no internet, and no video games. So it was either Paint or Word. And I'm a terrible artist. So that was kind of the only direction I could go. And I wrote this like the world's worst Jason Bourne, James Bond martial arts movie ripoff, just absolute garbage. But
Oh, that's awesome.
I had so much fun that I was doing it that I was like, okay, this is something I could see myself doing. So over the next decade or so after that, I just kind of kicked around a few ideas here and there. But then I was 25, 26 when I started writing, and it's been a wild ride ever since. I wrote my first story on a plane trip to visit my brother in Vancouver. I was living south of the border in Baja California, Mexico at the time. So I had this 5 hour plane ride, 3 hours at the airport each way. I managed to write, I think, 13,000 words over the course of
Oh,
that
wow.
weekend to write a story. And I was like, okay, this is fun. Let's do more. And that was how it was born. The first book of mine, that was the story that I wrote that weekend. So it was just like, I guess it was fated to be.
Yeah. That's crazy. 13,000 words. That's for really like, just going over a weekend. That's really good. So I feel like most
It
people are like,
was
dang, that's
it was
fast.
a great story. So I think I had just come off reading Malazan Book of the Fallen,
Ooh.
the second one. I think it is, where it's the chain of dogs. Right, that scene just hit,
Oh
and I was like,
yeah.
so that was the story, right? I wrote this story that it was going to basically be. It's called The Last March. The original story was called The Last March. It's
Oh,
actually the
cool.
sixth book in my Silent Champion series, is
Oh,
where it
cool.
ended up being, and it was basically this doomed company of soldiers marching to their death. It's right there in the title. It was originally called The Last March of the 13th Rifles, and it was kind of like a bunch of fantasy riflemen, like gnomish technology, real D&D flavor,
Oh, cool.
just marching to their death, being killed by these massive monsters and sacrificing themselves to stop the monsters from getting past, and kind of like a 300 last stand,
Yeah.
bringing down the walls of the canyon. So that was the story that I told, and it was so addictive because I was like, okay, we introduce all these characters, now let's kill them off mercilessly, like he did in the chain of dogs. And so that was the story that kept me writing all weekend, and I was absolutely hooked by just how dark I could take things.
Well, that's awesome. I have to say, Dead House Gates has to be one of my favorite books. I loved that. Yeah, like that. That was such just yeah. He did not care. He was like George R. Martin in that thing with
Oh
the
man,
chain of
he
dogs.
he
Like
he
that
took
whole
it to a
series,
whole
really.
new level. Like that
Yeah,
was just, there was this, it's just this endless struggle to survive, and then this
yep,
moment of hope that is ripped from you so cruelly. And I was like, this is masterfully done. Like you feel every single moment of that
yeah,
journey. And
yeah.
I was like, that is what I wanted to replicate with this story. And I am happy to say that the ending made me cry as I was writing it. So I was like, all right, I did the best I could.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Um, that's I do like what you say there though, like with like inspiration. Just going back to Mal's, and there's so many times where I'm like, oh, I really want to do something similar. I was actually just talking to James Doolin about this, and Logan Dean Irons about, with him, with with Steven Erickson in particular, like, you're trying to capture those moments, that in writing that you love to read. So I think that makes total sense. There was so many times where, like Tay-Hole and Bug are bickering or whatever, and I love that
Yeah.
relationship. Or yeah, like I felt that to that book. Like we got done and I was just like, I think we took like a 3 or 4 week break. I just needed time between that and
Wow.
like Memories of Ice or whatever it was. Yeah. Whatever
Yeah.
the third was. I think I'm blanking right now. But yeah, it was like it was heavy. So but I could see where that would make you want to write though. I think just
Yeah.
we actually just got done with the whole the first 10 or whatever, like the series, and we added one of the Ian Esselmont's, like the Return of the the Guard or whatever, the Crimson Guard or whatever.
Crimson Guard. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a cool book in itself. Like that actually made me really want to do something kind of like Dragon Age, like the Wardens or whatever. Just like, those organizations are always just so cool, that trope. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's super cool. Well, that's awesome. Gnomish
Yeah.
technology to me always
And
sounds
actually,
cool too. So.
the Crippled God, that book there inspired like the whole flavor of my fantasy world. So there was
Oh, cool.
that moment. There's this moment in Crippled God. I'm not spoiling it for anybody who hasn't read Malazan, but it's where everything you know about the world and the gods and all of that gets turned on its head. And I was like, okay, this was mind blowing. I'm gonna do something like that. So in the beginning you think things are one way, and by the time you get to Darkblade Savior, things are totally flipped up on their head, and
Oh,
then
cool.
they stay flipped on their head in that, like, it was that same big world changing level twist. Then it, like, so when I got to the end of this book, it was originally 6 books, the Hero of Darkness series. I got to the end of the 6th book and I was like, I just set up this big twist and now I'm not going to tell any more story. No, this is the end of the first story arc. We need to go more. So that this is how what started off, it was intended to be a trilogy, right? Assassin, killing demons, saving the day, became a 4 book, became a 6 book, became 15 books, each of which are about this thick or thicker. So this is the evolution of the series, and it is thanks to the Crippled God where I came up with this big world changing plot twist. But I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
one of the things that Malazan actually taught me is that I don't like high fantasy. So someone described high
Interesting. Yeah.
fantasy to me in the sense where it's like these big concepts, big worlds, big magic systems, big gods. Like the stories are so big, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Whereas epic fantasy, you can still have a big story, but it's all about the characters. So The Way of
Yeah, yeah.
Kings is a classic epic fantasy example, right? This big ass world, but at the end of the day, it's Kaladin's story, it's Dalinar's story, it's Adelin's. It's 5 people's stories.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas with Malazan, I don't even know how many point of view characters there
Oh,
were.
geez.
It's
Yeah.
100 people's stories. I remember next to nothing of the story at large. I remember the bridge burners marching to their death. Bam, gut punch. That's what I want. This crippled god twist. Bam, mental mind fuckery. That's what I want. Like these moments. So if I can take these moments of the big high concept, high fantasy stuff and tie it in with that, because that more character driven plot of epic fantasy,
Yeah, yeah.
that is when something spectacular like The Way of Kings gets made.
No, I totally agree with you there. Yeah, and trying not to spoil things. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I always call it like the Daredevil, or like what do you call it? Your whatever, your neighborhood vigilante level. Those to me, like the Daredevil, the first 2 seasons were absolutely amazing because he was getting into the different stuff, right? That was a little higher, but it was really at the ground level. And I
Yeah.
do agree with you. I think that those stories, at least to me, from the epic fantasy, that's why I'm like Way of Kings more personally than
Yeah.
Malzian. But I like Dead House Gates because you had both, but you had like kind of the D&D party, with Fiddler and them, kind of going, and Callum like going
Yeah.
off. But without that part, I don't think I would have liked it nearly as much.
Yeah.
But that was what really set it apart for me and made it my favorite. Was I do think that the first one, Gardens of the Moon, it had different. There were like 4 or 5 different pairs or groups that could have been considered that, but it wasn't
Yeah.
the huge scope. Yeah, and there were times
Yeah.
where I think I still like those individual adventures, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Within Malzahn, but when it got to the bigger scope, you just kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
I didn't realize what I didn't like about it. So I think that makes sense. That's what I didn't
Exactly.
really like about it. So,
And so for the Black Company is a great example of, it's
oh,
dark fantasy, but it's epic, right? You get the bridge burners dynamic boiled
yep,
down to these, and so it's a tight knit story, and that tightness, I feel like for me is what anchors me. There's a lot of readers out there who just dig that high concept, high fantasy stuff. It's just not me. Like,
yeah, yeah,
I don't want, or I don't need an interesting premise. I don't need a really intellectual question. What I want is for people to feel things strongly and for me to feel them strongly. So all of the books that I have enjoyed, as you can see behind me, there's a lot of them. You're not going to find a single high fantasy on this list. I think like every single one of them is going to be epic fantasy. It's going to be dark fantasy because they really are character anchored. There's
yeah,
the occasional story. For example, Empire of the Wolf by Richard Swan
mm,
just came out the last couple of years.
yeah, yeah,
It is a little bit more high concept. It is a little bit more bigger in scope, but you're still like narrow focus on the characters. So it kind of
yeah,
melds both. And I liked that. It wasn't the strong character driven story in the sense of the word. Like it was, the characters were the anchor, but you didn't really dive into their emotions very deeply like I like
mm,
to. So they drove the story in that sense. They drove the plot, but then it was more big picture stuff, but it ended up being enjoyable for that sense of things. Whereas you give me like a Greatcoats, right, or a Red
oh
Rising
yeah,
where it's all about Darrow's struggles. Spectacular. I am there for it from start to finish, and that's what I write
nice,
too. I'm just like
yeah,
all of my stories tend to be single point of view characters if I can help it. Sometimes I need to do more, but like this one, I mean, this is one point of view character, and it's going to be 15 books because this one person has so much emotional torment to suffer through. Basically, that's what it all comes down to. You
yeah.
create someone who's emotionally complex to suffer as much as they can. That's the story that becomes so engaging.
Yeah, yeah. No, I totally agree there. It's cool, with having, started, book one for you. I had arcs that people tried to, and I was like, I'll do it. And then my life blew up, like with work and stuff. So my wife, she's like,
Yeah.
you are so behind. I was like, I'm like, I think 8 behind right now. And I was like,
Wow.
someone answered it. I was like, you're on my, not that I don't want to read the arcs, but it's like I was trying to read for people, but I said, you're on my personal list. So Andy, you're on my
Yeah.
personal list. You're my first
Okay,
one I
good.
can
I'll
get
take
back
it.
to. So I'm like, I'm trying so hard to help people. And my wife, she goes, you just should have said no. I'm like, I probably should have, but I can't. So, but you're on my personal list. That's
It's
the number one I'm going back to. So,
it's such a delicate balance. So I've been reading a lot more in the last couple of years to where like I think this month I've read like 10 books or something.
oh, wow.
Some novellas, some chonkers, kind of everything. And I find that when I do a lot of like art requests, which I have been doing, or like to write or record book reviews, it's fun, but then there's the pressure. Whereas when I read the books that I want to read, it takes the
Yeah.
pressure off a little bit. So then it's just kind of like finding that balance. So I think this month, a lot of my reads have been, so I read A Court of Thorns and Roses because it was time.
Yeah.
I had to do it for the internet's sake. Um, and it was fun. But then I read another book after that by J.D. Evans, Reign and Ruin, and I was just blown away by that one. And it ended up being more enjoyable because I had no expectations of it. And then a couple of other books that I've read this month, there were some really good ones. There were some okay ones. I don't think I've had a dud. I don't think I've had a dud since the beginning of the year. Every book that I've started, I've finished, and I've enjoyed it enough. There were a couple like N.K. Jemison's Broken Earth. I read fifth season as a buddy read with someone. I got to the end and I was like, it didn't do enough for me. This is a classic example of high fantasy where it's all about the concept, the question, the intellectual theory that's being proposed, and the characters left me wanting. So I will eventually go back to that series someday, but
Yeah.
it's nowhere near the top of my list. Whereas right now, I've been hearing amazing things about The Will of the Many. I'm going to start it today, even though a friend and I are buddy reading it starting May 1st. It's 2 days early, but we're both like, all right, we're gonna get into this because everyone raves about about the story so much. So that's kind of, it's hard to find a balance, but once you do, you can still help people and, create
Yeah.
content while still enjoying what you're reading.
Yeah, yeah. And I just want to point out to our audience that you should definitely check out Andy's TikTok and Instagram. I feel like you've had some really great videos, showing your, the reading, that you've been doing lately. So I've gotten some good recs from you there. So keep it up there. That's been awesome. I've been trying to share them like crazy. I do have to say, talk about balance. Like I have not found it with my own personal reading, but in terms of, I've been trying, but in terms of like what my buddy reads, my best friend and I, we have book clubs. So we finished Malazan. Now we're on Way of Kings. I have noticed that I think I'm going to try to, there are certain books that him and I are going to buddy read together. If I had not had him, I wouldn't have finished Malazan.
Yeah.
And I think it's like what you're saying, right? So there are certain books like that that I think him and I are flipping out. And I'm kind of putting books forward that I thought were going to be really interesting, but that I know he's definitely gonna be interested in, but that we can buddy read together to, to try and get through if I struggle with a little bit. Cause I like that, like you're saying, like the more personal, like the D&D aspect or whatever. It's just your I call it the Forgotten Realms of Dragonlance stuff, right? Like you have a party or a particular point of view or just a couple people or one, and the story's from that, and it is on a more personal level. So I'm just more used to that style of reading, and it's nothing wrong with the books, but I just got to learn how to read them, I guess, if that makes sense. So
yeah, but then cool. It may not jive with you. I
too,
read a horror novelette for a friend of mine, and I was like, this was fun. I would never have read this had you not been my friend, and I said I'll read it for you. Like I enjoyed every minute of it, but it wasn't enjoyable enough that I'm like, I want more. And it's just because horror is not my genre. Now you write horror cleverly into a fantasy story, you dress it up in the right window trappings, I'm there. You give me a romance on its own, contemporary romance, I'll read it because I have to, or because, whatever. Now you give me a well-done fantasy romance, like, for example, Legacy of the Brightwash by Crystal Matar, or this one, Reign and Ruin by J.D. Evans. Like, that is my number one romance read for the year so far. It is spectacular. Oh, it is so good. Like, to where I'm dying for the summer reading challenge to come in, because so over the summer from June to September, basically, this Facebook group that I run, Indie Fantasy Addicts, we do a summer reading challenge where we compete and read indie books for points and prizes and all of that. And I am incredibly competitive. So last year, out of the 150 or so that played, I was like in the top 30. Which that's crazy. Which is pretty amazing, considering some of these people read like a book or two a day. So I'm like, all right, top 25 this year for me. We'll see if I can pull it off. But so my summer is consumed with indie fantasy. So during the rest of the year, I try to read more like traditionally published stuff. And, just because I want to see what else is out there. So I'm very excited to get back to the indie stuff, because I've probably got like 40 indie books that I need to read. Some people have sent them to me. Some people have recommended them to me. And I'm very excited because I love reading indie stuff. What I say is indies do an amazing job of filling in the gaps between the tent poles created by traditionally published authors. Like, you're never going to find an indie author who will create a Red Rising, right? That there is something very specific, or it's gonna end up being picked up by tradition. But then you can find a lot of authors who will do something that is Red Rising meets this, or Red Rising adjacent. And then it's exactly, I love Red Rising, and so you tell me this is Red Rising similar to it, I'm in. So this is where indie authors, we really have the advantage. We don't have to stand out and be super unique like traditionally published authors do. We can mix and match, and it creates something unique in its own sense of the word.
No, I totally agree. And that kind of goes back to our crossover episode with SFF Addicts with Adrian MJ. And MJ does that all the time, right? On TikTok for Book Talk, where she's like, you have this, and then she'll put the book together, be like, this is what you want for this indie. So I think that makes total sense. It is nice, right? Like, I'm literally thinking to myself, like, I want to do a fantasy, as I'm calling it. So I just said like a dark fantasy. I just want something in between stuff I'm doing. And just takes our old D&D party and this amazing campaign we had, and it's just kind of taking me by storm. So now I have to kind of go back and tell it to hold on for a minute, because I got to finish some novella stuff for urban fantasy. But it's cool, right? Because I know you do.
Those stories that just kick your teeth in and say, write me. Actually, So JDL Roselle and we have kicked around the idea of doing a co-write because I wrote Dragon Blood Assassin with Jamie Castle and had a
Yeah.
blast. And then Josiah JDL, I had read his Last Ranger, and I was like, "You have exactly what I don't have. You do the
Oof.
worlds. You do the things. We work together. I
Yeah.
kill the people. We both create amazing characters, and you fill in the gaps that I have as an author. So I'm like, let's do this. And we had, we kicked around an idea for a little while, and then I was driving home from visiting my brothers. It was about a 2-hour drive, and this idea just like slammed into my head. So when I got home, I wrote it, and it was just like such a weird, interesting concept. But it's like I've got the idea down on paper. He's in, but between our schedules, who's gonna have time to write it?
Yep. Well, you already sold one. Sounds amazing. Oh,
Did
you got
I
it
did I
back. I
where
think
did
it's
I
fine.
hang? Okay, good.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I was gonna say that, you were saying, that you guys really didn't have time to write, this, which I mean, with both of your schedules, I can
Yeah.
imagine. But now you got me like really excited because I could totally see where you guys would like Clayton and Michael like fill in each
Yeah.
other's gaps and or even like Fletcher and Anna Smith Spark. Oh my God, what an amazing novella in the Shadow They're Dying. I told Mike, I texted him, I was like, I need more.
It's
So
on my list. It's on my list of things
yeah,
to read.
it's really good.
It's too hard to to get to everything that I want to get
Oh,
to.
for
So
sure.
For May, I'm starting with The Will of the Many today or tomorrow early because I have to. Sun Eater, Empire of Silence, right?
Oh,
Everyone
yep,
raves about this, and I'm like, well, if I get super addicted to it, then I have to keep reading it, and then I'm stuck.
yep,
But then
yep.
I've got MJ's Among Thieves that I want to get to.
Oh, yeah,
But
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's 2 books. So if I love it, I'm gonna have to get the next one. So then it's
Yep,
just like, well,
yep.
there you go,
Duology,
is
yep,
another series.
yep.
Tempest of Tea is one that I've heard amazing things about.
I've not
It's
heard
it's
that
been
one. Okay.
all over. It's been all over TikTok and Instagram. It's like
Yeah.
it's like a heist. It's like Six of Crows with
Oh,
tea is
why
what
did you
I've heard
say
it pitched
that,
as.
Andy?
I'm
You know
like,
I'm a
I'm
heist
in.
guy.
I
Oh.
know. I love a good heist. So this, I mean, it's why I've got MJ's Among Thieves, and then
Yep.
In the Shadow of the Dying, and then I got the last Argosy book from Sebastian de Castel. I
Oh,
love the
nice.
Argosy series, so I have to read this one too. And
Yeah.
then there is Warhammer, which I've got the first 3 books in that. So I'm like, okay, I have to read that. And then Sons of Darkness by Murav Garanti. I was on
Oh,
the
yeah, yeah.
panel with him, the villains panel. I was like, fuck, this sounds amazing, Indian inspired. So that's way too many books to fit into a month. So I'm like, well, what do I read? It's gonna be a hard month with so many good books to choose
Yeah.
from.
Yep. You should just
And
get
that's
like
not
a
even
wheel and just
counting.
go from there.
So that's the books that I'm like, okay, but then as you can see behind me, so these 2 shelves here, they are books that are on my to be read list. Most of these, you can see Pathlighter up here from Rob
Oh,
Wood. He's
nice.
going on
Yeah,
my
yeah.
my indie list. We've got ZS Diamante here. I just met this author, Kaylee Prime, on or Kaylia Prime, I don't know how to pronounce her name, on
Yeah, yeah.
Saturday at our local Indigo. She had a book signing. She
Oh, that's
lives
cool.
Yeah, she lives about an hour away, and I was like, awesome, let's do this. So I got her first book. um I don't know, I've got just way too many books, so it's great. I'm never going to run out of stuff to read, but it
Yeah, yeah.
definitely means that like I'm going to film a video of all the indie books that I'm going to read, and I swear the
Oh, cool.
the book stack alone is going to be as tall as I am, and
You
that's
should
not even
compare
counting
it.
ebooks.
Yeah, you should compare it with the stack of books you wrote, because I gotta say that was still my favorite
Ooh.
Instagram that anybody's done this year. So if anybody hasn't seen that yet, you gotta check out Andy's Instagram where he stacked up the books that he's written, and it's hilarious because I can't remember who I was talking to. They're like, "Man, Andy's got like a mountain over there." So when you started to put on, on Instagram and more on TikTok, what you were reading, they were like, "What is Andy doing all day?" Like he's reading and he's writing like so much more than us. I was like, I know.
Yeah.
We feel like we're lazy or something, So we're trying to get
It's,
caught up.
I've never seen it before until I took that picture. And I was like, what kind of asshole has that much to say? Like, no. Because I'm telling you, so the Darkblade 8 books is like 2 million words. No. Close to 3 million words, right? Right now. Then Cerberus is 1 million. Silent Champions is about 1 million, give or take.
Oh, wow.
Heirs of Destiny, 600,000, maybe 700,000. Queen of Thieves is going on 500,000. Like, this is just too. Who has that much to say? It's a delight to do this, right? I love it, and it's because I get addicted to characters, right?
Yeah.
The Hunters, the Darkblade series is going to be 15 books because this massive crippled god inspired world changing plot twist, but also there's this emotional discovery that he makes at the end of the 4th book, Darkblade Savior, and it's like, okay, I could leave this here, or I could use it to torture this poor fucker and just wring it out of him. Like it has been already 4 solid books of emotional torment. And by books, I do mean 200 to 400,000 words each of just solid emotional torture for this guy. And it's delightful because, so this character, I realized this looking back, the Hunter is basically me in every way except the cool ways. Like, I am not badass as an assassin. I am very much the bookish introvert. I mean, I can do kickboxing. Okay, I can hold my own. But it, like, emotionally, this guy is me. So the first 4-book story arc is basically his journey to becoming a stepfather, and inevitably he is absolute shit at it, like I was, right? I mean, we'll say a little bit more dramatic than I was. I never left my kid alone in the middle of an enemy, as a prisoner in a little iron cage. No, I never did that. But I was not I was 21 years old when I got together with my wife. I had no idea what I was doing. I've spent the last 15 years stumbling through life as a stepfather, right? The whole second story arc, starting with book 5, was his journey to being the stepfather of older kids. My youngest just turned 20, and as of Saturday, I am an empty nester, right? They all moved out. So I have succeeded as a parent in that sense. They're all still alive and they're all, doing well. But it's like, now what role do I serve in their lives? They don't live with me. They don't need me to solve their problems, but do they? What problems can I solve? What problems, what role do I serve in their life? And this is the story that is so compelling to me in the Hunter's second story arc, because he's dealing with the children figure in his life. But like in the Heirs of Destiny series, which is the sequel spinoff, the young adult characters that have kind of been in his story, they go off on their own adventure. They leave home and go off on their adventure. And then he kind of comes back and reunites with them in Darkblade 7 and 8. And it's like, they need him, but they don't need him. And it's just this really fun dynamic that's just delightful to explore. This emotional arc is what keeps me coming back. And then I get to do things like killing, entire armies worth of people. And it's fun. So it's kind of that balance between the two that keeps me writing these books. Like the Cerberus series became 13 books because, number one, he's a recovering drug addict, paraplegic, former special ops sniper, right?
Oh, wow.
That all of those words are their own story, right? The prequel novel was him hitting rock bottom and crawling his way out of the gutter to become the guy we meet in book 1. But his his journey to recovery and to sobriety continues to persist throughout, and it's what leads him to start building allies. He literally finds one of his former fellow spec ops people overdosed on his doorstep, so that his journey helps her through her journey. And then you've got paraplegic. He's a badass in his AI powered armor, and then he's in a wheelchair the next scene. Like, That's a story in and of itself that you can just
Yeah,
mine
yeah.
endlessly. And then Sniper. I mean, I don't know how many great Sniper books there are, but there's none that I've read in like sci-fi or or fantasy
Yeah,
adjacent.
yeah, yeah,
So
totally. Yeah.
it's like this is so much. So basically, I just made this list of sniper versus sniper, AI versus AI, special forces, special forces, just these matchups. And this is why it became 12 books, is because I wanted to do all of this stuff. But it's the character that sinks my teeth into this and makes me write all of these words. Like every single character moment expands and becomes so much longer because I really want to extract the most out of every minute that I spend with them, and to create the kind of story that when the bridge burners die, or when the chain of dogs ultimately fails, you feel it like a gut punch or a kick in the teeth because you're so engaged with these characters. That's what I want.
No, I feel like you just set up like so book one, right? If we go back to Dark Place Essence, so I just again, like we said in our crossover episode, I was just so shocked because my friend was like, "You got to read this, you got to read this," and I had it, and I'm like, I'm trying," and then I started you out of order, and he's like, "Don't do that," because now I have arcs, and I'm just like, "Oh my goodness," because you just left me so many questions that need to be answered, and talk about. I've talked about this a couple times with some other authors. When we talk about getting a bang for your buck with that first chapter. But I'm still amazed at what you're able to do with that first chapter of just, like you talk about setting you up for expectations. I mean, and when you're telling me that you're going to write 15 books now, I'm cool with that because I love Jim Butcher, Dresden Files. I love,
Yeah.
Kevin Hearns. He had like 9, I think. I want like at least 15 of Atticus and them. So that just excites me because I can totally tell my friend was right. I'm really enjoying your character. And I feel like there's just so many cool things, that you can do with it. And there's just so many things that, you set up within the world. I think I'm like 150 pages and something like that. I just feel like so much stuff was popping
just
off.
just at the beginning.
But that's what's crazy, right? As I was saying to my friend, I was
Yeah.
like, he goes, "You're just at the beginning." I go, "But there's so much that's happened," or like I can
Yeah.
see, below the surface that stuff's gonna happen. He's like, "Oh, just wait," and I'm just like, "Holy moly!" But that's cool that you're able to. I like longer series personally. They're comfort reads for
Yeah.
me. Particularly if I like a character like
Yeah.
yours, and I just think that's cool. So many people that I have to say just real quick before I forget. So I was thinking about this when you were saying, you're going back and forth these series. I've had like 5 people, and I don't even know what books they've suggested of yours to me. Where I'm like, I know, I'm like, I'm trying. I'm like, Andy's writing faster than I can read. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, I had, and like, I don't know, like there was like I had gift cards, the last 6 months, so I bought like 6 or 7. I had 6 or 7 before that. I was like, guys, I'm trying. I have all 6 or whatever you had recently, right, with Dark Blade. I'm like, I bought everything that Andy has out for this so far. I'm trying, and I'm doing my best, guys. But it was so funny that I had 5 people that were like, like, hey, you're also gonna like this by Andy.
That's
And it was
awesome.
just really cool. So yeah, so I just had to tell you that because I just like I'm
Thank
like,
you.
I know, guys. I'm like, I have all of Andy's stuff on Goodreads, as want to read. And I have
Yeah.
once I get my other gift card, I'll start going through again. But I'm just like, holy moly, Father's Day's coming, guys. I promise.
Yeah.
But it was really cool, So I'm
That's
glad to
awesome.
see that, you're able to get that and keep going.
For me, the thing, kind of like how we were both impacted so deeply by the same moments in Malazan, right?
Yeah.
The gardens of the, okay, let's say this: Animander Rake, total badass. Do you remember anything other than his badassery? Like, he's got a really
Uh
cool sword and a flirting moon, right? There's not a lot to him. There's no real emotional gut punches, but Fiddler and the Bridge Burners, they will forever be the moments that started me reading. And then when they were no longer on the page, I was like, do I want to keep reading? This
yep.
is what I want. This is my goal when I write. I want people to say, oh my God, the Hunter, Alana, Erevan, all these characters, spectacular, these emotional moments, even if they don't remember the story at large, they walk away with, I was repeatedly gut punched in the face, and whether I cried or laughed or whatever it was, that memory stays with them. And then, like, I mean, you see that I collect books. What I do when I see these books is I see and I remember the memories, not of the stories themselves, but the way that I felt when I was reading them. And this is, I think, what makes collecting books so delightful, is that anytime I look at, for example, The Witcher, right? I'm gonna remember just how many hours I spent dancing through the Witcher game, playing Gwent, loving all the weird story choices, and then diving back into the world and then enjoying the Henry Cavill performance. And it was just like, it's this whole amalgamation of enjoyment that I will forever treasure and always remember when I do this, or when I look at, you know, the Warded Man over here, the Demon Cycle. I remember before that book, I couldn't read. I read 10 books in a year, counting audiobooks before this, because I was, you know, authors, editorial brain, impossible to shut off.
Yep.
The Demon Cycle, I picked it up by accident or unintentionally. I was filling out this bookshelf from used bookstores, and I was just like, oh, good. 5-book series is complete, done. Another series. Like, I basically bought like 50 books in the same shopping trip. And I just happened to pick that one up, and I was instantly hooked. And I was like, I ripped through the 5 books of Demon Cycle, the first book of the follow-on series, and then all the novellas. So every time I look at that, I'm like, I remember going from not being a reader to being the addicted reader that I am now. So this is the memory that I want. I want when people to look at my book, when they see Assassin, they're going to be like, fuck, that scene. Oh my God. And then they're going to look at the next one. And they're going to be like, that scene. And even if they don't remember the bullshit about my gods, and the name of the nobleman who dies, and the, you know, the fencing scene inspired by Princess Bride, but they remember that emotional gut punch in the beginning, and then in the middle, and then in the end, I will have succeeded as a writer. Like, that's all it ever comes down to.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think that's all any of us can try to do, right? Is trying to emulate those great moments or those crushing moments. Yeah, like my friend said, he's like, oh, when he went through my fantasy book, my first one with the rough draft, and he's like, yeah, this is horrible. I go, oh, you didn't like it? He's like, he goes, I can't believe you're going to do this to these characters. And I'm like, oh, like it's horrible.
The best.
And I'm like, so I said, well, here's the thing. I go, this is only like draft 1. And like now with like draft 3, you know, like I feel so bad. And I'll sit there sometimes. I'll just be thinking about my like, you're okay. I'm like, no, I was like, maybe I need to go talk to somebody, you know, because but like I want to set you up for that fall, right? And I tell people, like, stuff goes down, like you know, but it sets up the other 2 books, you know, in the trilogy, and it gets you immersed into the world. I'm like, I love heists, but I use it in a different way. But it is a heist, unlike Mistborn, the first book. It's a total heist.
That's what I said. I said they promised me Kelsier was putting together a crew, and I immediately heard heist, and then there was no heist, and I was like, fuck you. And that's why Queen of Thieves exists. Legitimately.
I thought it was so funny. I just have to tell everybody where I got done, and I literally messaged you at like 10:30. I was like, Andy, I'm so sorry, but I just have to say this. I was like, there was no heist. And I was just so disappointed. And we had a conversation.
No heist.
I'm just like, yep. So I tell people all the time, I go, it's a real heist. Like, no offense to anybody or Brandon, but it's a real heist. But yeah, but like things happen because of the heist, right? I love the Italian job, you know, Ocean's 11, you know, whatever you want, the original one, the remake, whatever. Like, I love heists. I love thieves. That's why
any heist like, ever.
You know. Yep.
Did you watch the Inside Man, Clive Owen, Denzel Washington?
Oh my God, what amazing movie! Oh my God,
and it was a fine movie up until that end, and it was like boom, and that is the emotion that I took away from this, and I was like, if I could write something anything that good, boom, success. Like this is my approach to being a writer, is like, just do that holy shit moment as many times as you can. And set it up well. That's why my books become so long, is because it takes so much to set them up.
Yeah, and I do want to just say that to the audience is I had this rough draft, and my friends like, I don't think it's a 75K book, and that's where I struggled recently, because I have to figure out things to add, and I'm like, no, it might be 150K, you know, which is totally fine, but you know, I'm still trying to figure out, you know, exactly what the right story is for it, if that makes sense. But I just want to point out to the audience, because I think that's something that I've heard a lot of people say about your writing, you know, is that, they're chonkers, but, you know, it doesn't feel like it. I threw 150 pages with book 1 really quickly.
Oh, yeah. I thought you were going to say you threw 150 pages away of your book. And I was like, oh, that would kill me. I don't. So something that I have learned over the course of the 50-ish books that I've written is that every scene matters if it matters, right? I could have two people sitting at a table not talking to each other, and that could be interesting as long as it's relevant to the story, and as long as that silence is more interesting than what they might say. So it's just like, you could do anything you want in a book. You can make any ridiculous decision matter. As an example, in the book that I'm working on right now, Darkblade 9, the hunter is going somewhere, and I was like, it's been a while since he's had a fight. Let's just throw in someone randomly getting beaten in an alley. That was where I ended the chapter, walked away. Before I sat down to write the next day, I was like, oh, here's how I can tie this in. And it didn't make sense to the story at large yet, but I tied it in as a character introduction. The person getting beaten is now someone slightly more important. And then because of that beating, it changed who this character was. And then because of this beating and the changing, it changed who the character. And so all of a sudden, one-off random moment becomes super important. Or I was like, you know what? We're getting to the end of the chapter. He's about to go on a ship. What would be the most interesting way to say it? And it was like, well, shit, it's a pirate ship. Total throwaway line. And then it turns out that they weren't pirates, they were privateers. Used to be pirates that were hired to join the military, so then they're soldiers. So then they have that whole background going on where they fought in this big war from the Silent Champions. And then, you know, like everything snowballs when it's done right. So as a writer, I've learned to listen to that instinct that says, just do this throwaway line, or just do this thing to add a little bit of drama or a little bit of tension. And my instinct and I'll follow it, and then I will understand, or I will find a way to make it matter. And then every little detail matters. Then every little scene matters. As an example, the captain that you met in the beginning of Assassin, where the hunter is first killed, right? That whole scene was entirely contrived to show off how badass he is, Soul Hunger's ability, and then his humanity by he hates sex traffickers. Easy, you know. Turns out in book 9, I came up with this 2 days ago. The character that he meets, totally a world away, years away, owes him a debt because of something that captain and that ship did to his family. That's cool. 15 years earlier. And because the hunter killed him, it changes it from an antagonistic to an ally. Like, so random. But you just kind of follow that instinct, and then every detail matters, every conversation matters, every word matters. And then you have a story that doesn't meander. Like, there is one Witcher book, I believe it's this one, Baptism of Fire. It's basically the Witcher wandering around the world because he thinks Ciri's dead. So he has no purpose. That entire book was aimless. It was the worst of all of the Witcher books. And all he had to do was fix it was make sure that the Witcher's aimless wandering somehow ended him up helping Ciri, or in the same place as Ciri, or something that he does contributes to Ciri's story. And then it's not aimlessness, it is, you know, causality and correlation or whatever. But it's there is this sense of aimlessness that could have been fixed with one line or one scene or something. But that is the kind of thing that I think a lot of newer authors make when writing, or when they go into these longer books, is that the scenes can feel kind of aimless or purposeless because they're not serving some bigger purpose. So making every one of those scenes matter, and really taking your time for those scenes. Like, I always tell people, when you and I have a conversation, we're not going to get straight to the heart of matter. Hey, Daniel, how you doing? I'm going through a divorce. Like, it's not like that, right? It is, hey, Daniel, how you doing? How's the weather? How's the family? How's work? You know, oh, I'm busy playing sports, doing this. Oh, the wife and I, oh, how's the wife? Oh, we're having a hard time. Oh, we're getting a divorce. Like, this is a conversation. This is how conversations go in real life. So this is how they should go in writing. Yeah. Give your characters time to do that, to work up to what they're trying to say, to naturally go with that ebb and flow of a conversation. And then they'll surprise you by doing and saying things that make them feel more real and give you more to latch onto them as they develop and as you write them. If you could do that, that is how a character feels real, as opposed to the conversation. Like a lot of books that I read, the conversation feels a little stunted because it's like, here's what we're going to do, here's where, and then it ends, and then everyone
Yep.
goes their separate way. Whereas giving this space to just kind of to be inane, it sounds so silly, but talking about your favorite treat, right? It feels like nothing. In Darkblade 5, the someone gives the hunter's girlfriend candy. It's candy. Everyone loves candy, one and done, little one off. But then it turns out that he uses the candy to cement the alliance with someone else later on. It's like a bunch of knights who hate him that he's traveling with. They happen to love this candy, and all of a sudden everyone's sitting around the fire enjoying a piece of candy. Like a random little detail, but because it's used like that to sort of add the humanity, it becomes so much more interesting and relevant.
Oh, that's cool. I do think that adding layering like that, I guess is what I always call it.
Yeah.
To me, just makes more sense. I had with my fantasy, I had a situation where like my character, our two main characters, my buddy's character and mine, both were in the military and lost their squads. So they don't really trust anybody else, but they trust each other. And they're very sarcastic. It's a lot like Tahol and Bug. I just love that. So I wanted to do that. Speaking of Malazan. The other day I had a thought and I'm like, what if they put on this show, because we rolled horribly all the time, right? I was like, what if we put on this show of them flubbing everything up because they're actual like spies for the king, and then it's all just a front, and then there's different things that happen. I had a throwaway moment where I was like, oh, I need this thing to happen, and I was like, oh, I'll have them protect the parcel, but you don't know why. But then at the end of the book, a bunch of stuff happens, and it blows your mind. You're like, oh, everything flips, like you were saying, and then all of a sudden you have to rethink the entire story at every point where they flubbed up, or even like a small little thing like them protecting a satchel, and one of them goes and goes, oh, my buddy's stuff's in here, whatever, from the military or whatever, and you think, oh, that makes total sense because you would want to protect that, but really it serves a secondary purpose. So but I just think it's nice when, because I thought, oh my god, as a reader I would enjoy that more, right? I would enjoy that
for
flip.
Sure.
It would, it would make the characters more meaningful. And I don't know, as a writer, I feel like it's taken me a while, to get to that point to be able to see those. But I do agree with you. I'll just throw something in there. And maybe it's the GM side of me where now I'm getting better at taking those and crumbs and then making something, successful out of them. But I agree with you. Sometimes those details, you don't have to explain everything, but you could come back to them later and do something really cool with them. So
and they end up adding a little bit more color, a little bit more character, a little bit more depth. And then as you keep pulling that thread through the course of the story, through every interaction with those characters, through every decision, all of that, that's how you really get to the meat of who these characters are.
Yeah. No, it's cool. Yeah, I think that totally adds to the depth of the characters. And there's so many things like that too, right? Where you're saying with your candy example, like, I don't know, it's just like a cool little tidbit to a world building, right? That they even have candy, right? Warbreaker, like Brandon did such a good job. I think there's like smoothies, right? Well, they're in a tropical setting or subtropical setting, and you're like, well, how do you get ice here? And it was like, but it's like he does such a good job of talking about these restaurants and these smoothie bars and stuff. It sounds weird, but if you go and read Warbreaker, I don't know, to me it was really cool world building. I'm thinking of Brian Staveley, like City of Ruin or whatever, but he does that too, where he's got to get like logs to one spot, right? And then it just sounds like a stupid problem to have, but he was layering all these things. And I don't know, when I was going through his books, I'm like, man, it just feels like the world is real, because he thought about all these little details. That I remember him saying at Wizards Warriors and Words with those guys like Fletcher, Hearn, Ashton, and Hayes, where he was like, yeah, I just went from one thing to another, and then the next thing everybody's like, oh, this world feels really deep and and real. So I always think the iceberg is kind of like a weird method. I always think of it as like making a pond, if that makes sense. Like you kind of dig down and then you kind of dig further, and then the water just kind of comes in after that. That makes sense. But I think you get real depth when you kind of layer that way, and then you just you need something on the top, I think, right, in order to dig. So
well, it's like so a really good example of this from my real life is that I spent the last year at a kickboxing class. 2 nights a week, I'm hitting and kicking these guys for an hour and a half, right? I have spent a year with them, and it turns out in November we had a fight night at there was a local club that was playing the UFC fight. We're sitting waiting for the fight to go on, and we start talking, and it turns out he was reading The Witcher, and it turns out he was playing the same game that I was. And oh, the next book was the book that I had just finished reading. I was like, wait a minute, I have been punching you in the face for a year, and I have not known about this. So it's like you never really know who someone is until you start trying to get to know them. And so it's like anybody you see, any character that you see right off the bat, good, this is who they are, right? They're the way they talk, they're the way they dress, they're the way they act, they're the way they do everything. But there's always more. So just start asking questions. The character, I mean, not you, but you go there, you approach it the same way you would a conversation with a random stranger at a bar. You have someone ask, well, what's the deal? You know, why do you like this? Why is this the color here? What is this? You know, anything that you can kind of latch onto to drag more little details out of these characters, it becomes that sort of mining for gold that makes them so much more interesting.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I think it's just really cool when, I don't know, I just was talking to another author and they just came, it was something so simple, right? Like you just said, right? Like a shared book. Like there was just something that was so just interesting that they did with their character. I'm like, that makes the character feel so real, you know? And I
Yeah.
think if they like talk about their favorite thing or something. But it was just like so minuscule, but I was like, oh, that totally makes sense in conversation for, you know, for somebody to talk about this, like you're saying, right? Like after a year, and I'm like, oh, we've known this character for a while, and I'm like, oh, that kind of makes sense, you know, that now with the crew around them, they feel a little bit more comfortable, and they're in a different situation, so different things pop up, right? So yeah, I think that that makes total sense, right? Because that's real life, like you're saying. So I think that's really cool. My friend always calls it like the popcorn method or something, you know, right? We go from one question to another for like interviews. So I think that that is a great way to incorporate that into writing, which is pretty cool. So I know we're kind of winding down on time, Andy, but we've had a great talk about a lot. It's been fun. But I just want to make sure that, you know, we save some time, you know, for you to tell us kind of what you're working on now. And you know, maybe like future projects that people, you know, can expect from you, you know. And I got to point out that Andy's really tall, so when we say his stack of books was really tall, we mean really tall.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just want to just see what you got going on, and you know what we can expect from you,
Okay.
you know, next couple months.
Okay, so right now I am finishing, I'm on the denouement of Darkblade Book 9. It's called Voyager. Shipboard murder with clue-inspired color-based characters, right? I was like, I loved that. So I was like, you know what, we're doing this. So it's been a lot of fun doing that.
That's awesome.
I should be done with that this week. This week being the first week of May. 260, 270,000 words, give or take. I am contracted to write a trilogy that is still, the information is still under wraps. There will be a press release. There will be information disseminated. When I can shout about it, I will. I'm very excited
Awesome.
about this project. It seems like a ton of fun. It's basically, when it was presented to me, it was almost exactly the same project that I was conceiving of already on my own. So it was very easy to just switch my brain to do this one. I was like, I'm immediately
Cool.
in.
Yeah.
After that, it's going to be a trilogy, so it'll be 3 books. I probably will write books 1 and 2 back to back, and then I need to write another heist novel before my next Queen of Thieves Kickstarter near the end of the month. And this one
I didn't know that.
near the end of the
That's
year.
awesome.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So in the Kickstarter for the special edition, which you can see here, very very pretty. Someone backed the highest tier, which is write your own, craft your own heist with me. So I'm basically taking bits and pieces of their life story and turning it into. It's going to be a prequel for 2 of the favorite characters from the Night Guild series.
That's cool.
And so I need to write that before the next Kickstarter. I think the campaign is coming in like September is when it'll be out, because I think it's like 6 months apart for, you know, to give time for fulfillment.
Yeah.
But if all goes well, I'll have that one ready to roll then. And then I'll probably write the 3rd book, and then I need to get back to Darkblade because I've still got 6 more Darkblade books to write after that. So after Darkblade 10, which I'm fingers crossed hope to start working on before the end of the year, then I don't know what comes next. It's gonna be interesting to see where I go next. I might just, you know, I know I might just full steam ahead and finish all the.
That'd be awesome.
It's a little nuts. I'm hoping, but we'll see. You know, Man proposes, God disposes.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, that's awesome. I look forward to all that. I'm like trying, I'm just waiting for school to be done. Honestly, it's hard because I'm waiting on edits that are almost done. I
Oh
was
yeah.
late. So I had like, I don't know if I told you, but I had like oral surgery. I'm fine,
Woo.
everybody, but I had like stuff going on. I had two infections. So it was hard to get everything,
Wow.
done. And I was just in so much pain and, you know how it is to write when you're in just ungodly pain. That's not very helpful. So I'm super
Does
behind for the
not
year. I
work.
told everybody. Yeah, my wife has been so accommodating though. Like we have literally days set aside from now till September so I could finish my two prequel novellas and stuff. But I'm just like I was telling her
Nice.
about some of your lengths of novels and stuff, and she was just like, "Do you need more time?" I'm like, "Well, I do." I was like, my son doesn't. He's just little, so he doesn't get it and stuff. But tried to get where I can. But that's awesome. I am so looking forward to getting back to Darkblade, and I love the Hunter. I have to say, my friend, I was telling people before on here with a couple people, and I was raving about it. But I love that my friend, my first friend, now of six, suggested the book to me. He's like, "This is totally your thing." Him and I were huge Durden fans and entry fans and stuff,
Yeah.
and just different books that we liked. And I'm loving it. So I can't wait to
That's awesome.
to I love the arcs, like I said, don't get me wrong, but I'm also really looking forward to this summer, getting back to, how it is, like
Yeah.
your personal list. So maybe I'll do what you said. I'll try and
Oof.
insert a couple more in between. So maybe that will
Yeah.
spur me on. So I'm hoping that helps. But
it,
yeah,
it'll
that's really
rekindle the
awesome.
joy of reading if you're not
Yeah, yeah,
always reading for duty. Like reading ARCs to write a review is nice, especially if they're good. But then there's like,
yeah, yeah.
okay, you have to do it. You have to write the review. You have to do the whole thing. So there's always that question. Whereas if it's just like, oh, here's this book, randomly choose, done, let's go.
Yep,
It's
yep,
changed
yep.
reading for me.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm gonna take your advice. So I'll probably. We'll have Eric Wagg's first one. I'm totally blanking on it, but it's like a Conan like type thing. And it's only like 200
Ooh.
pages, so hey, I'll send it to
Ah,
you. Remind me. It's really good,
nice.
but there's two of them. They're about the same, and it's really quick. So my wife, she's like, "You can't do that." I go, "Maybe that's what I need, though. To kind of." I actually have Jamie Castles though, Purgatory. That my son just will not allow me to finish. And I'm like, I just need like 2 hours and I'll be done. That one's been awesome in terms of sci-fi, but he sent me a book too, and I was like, I want to definitely get back to that one. I had a couple fantasies that I finished that were so good, but you know how it is. It's
Nice.
just maybe I'm just getting burnt out because I've read so much at this point. So maybe I just need to do some more writing. But there's just too much
Yeah,
out
I'm the
there, like you were saying
opposite.
earlier. So
I'm the opposite. I do so much writing that if I don't read, I will burn out.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's like my wife. She's like, you haven't written very much. I was like, I just need to like take a break. I was like with my son, even I feel like I ended up doing more writing when I was counting words and stuff. Like I didn't finish projects, but outlines, like I think I told you before, and Adrian, before we got started with MJ last time, like I finished like 5 outlines, but I mean we're talking like total 30-40,000 words, for all the
Wow.
outlines. I mean, like they were like full outlines.
Yeah, yeah.
So at some
That's
point,
awesome.
well, this summer, yeah, I got a lot of dark fantasies that were just like on my brain, so we can get there. But I really look forward to getting back to your books, and I'll have you on, hopefully in the future, and we can, chit chat about some other stuff like that. But anything else you need, my
Anytime.
friend, yeah, you just hit me up, and we'll
I
have some
definitely
fun.
will.
So perfect. Well, Andy, I appreciate your time, and it was awesome. And per usual, hit me up on social media, and we'll see what each other is reading. So other than
All
that, I hope
right.
you have a good rest of the day. I'll see you
Thank you.
later.
You too.
Yep. Bye.
Cheers.
Later.